Okay, continuing on, we're going to talk about saving documents and understanding the different types of file formats, which just means the different ways that we can save an image. So the first thing that I want you to do, still having your Photoshop A1 file up, is we're going to go up to File and down to Save As. When that pops up, what I want you to do is navigate to your desktop and find that Web1 folder that we made and go ahead and go into your lessons. So notice right now that the default format is a Photoshop file. That's because the photo right now that we're working with is a Photoshop file. If you notice up here at the end of the PSA1, it says .psd. PSD is the shorthand for a Photoshop file. So what I want us to do is just go ahead and hit save right now. And nothing's going to happen. If you were to pull up your folder and look into your lessons, you're going to see that we have a Photoshop file, PSA1. That's the one we just saved. Now what I want you to do is going back to Photoshop. We're going to do the same process except we're going to change the file type. So we're going to go File, Save As. And this time, instead of a Photoshop file, we're going to save it as a JPEG. So if you scroll down, find where it's just the plain old JPEG, and go ahead and click on that one. We're going to leave it as PSA1, that's fine. It's going to say that no items match your search right now. That's because we changed the file type from Photoshop to JPEG, and we haven't saved any other JPEGs in that folder yet. So go ahead and hit save. It's going to ask you this options box. You can just leave all of those as defaults and click OK. And notice that when we did that, our image changed from a PSD to a .jpg up here, which just means that now we have a JPEG image instead of a Photoshop file. So if we go back to our folder, you're going to see that we have a PSA1. One quick way you can tell the difference is that this shows the actual image of the picture. This is the JPEG. And the Photoshop file is always going to have this little thumbnail, the blue one with the PS. Okay. Once we get farther into working with Photoshop, you're always going to want to make sure that you're saving as Photoshop files unless it specifically says to save as a JPEG. Because when you save as a JPEG, you don't have access to any of your layers. And remember, in the last video, I just said how important our layers are. Those are one of the reasons Photoshop has the capabilities that it does. So if you save as a JPEG, what happens is it compresses everything down and makes it one layer. If we save as a Photoshop file, all of our layers stay intact. So that's one of the really important things about saving as a Photoshop file. So what you can do is come back here into Photoshop, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually get rid of our A1 right now, because we do not need this anymore. So you can just go right up here and click out of PSA1. It's just going to go back to a blank workspace. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Google Classroom and go and grab the PSA2. So click on that. Again, we go to our ... open in a new window, and then hit the download button. And then go ahead and open it. It's going to pop up in Photoshop. It's the same parrot picture, it's just this one has been cropped a little bit. Notice that we have a Photoshop file here, .psd. What we're going to talk about in this section is how to understand and also change something called resolution. So we talked about how a bitmap graphic is composed of pixels. Okay, and remember that those pixels are essentially all those little squares that make up our bigger image. Okay, and you can think of a bitmap image as being a grid of thousands or millions of pixels. Okay, So when we're talking about resolution, what we're talking about is the number of pixels per inch, otherwise known as PPI. Okay, so for example, if you had a 1 inch by 1 inch Photoshop file with a resolution of 100, that would mean that each 1 inch by 1 inch has 10,000 pixels in it. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is how do we tell what our image resolution is, because what that's going to show us is how clear would that picture print if we were to print it off. Okay, so with this A2 open, what we're going to do is go up to our image tab and then go down to image size. And this little dialog box opens and it's telling us that right now in pixel dimensions, we're at 600 pixels by 600 pixels. However, our document size is 2 inches by 2 inches. And you can see that if you look at your ruler, if you remember to turn your ruler on from the first lesson, you can see that we're 2 inches by 2 inches down here on the horizontal and vertical rulers. Right now, our resolution is sitting at 300 pixels per inch. Now, one thing to remember is that 300 pixels per inch is the minimum that you have to have if you are going to print anything. If you are going to put an image up on a website somewhere, you can actually have the resolution as low as 72 pixels per inch. You don't have to have as high of quality when you're going to be putting it on a computer screen versus when you actually print it off. So those are a couple of numbers you just kind of want to remember. 72 is web quality, 300 is print quality. Okay, so if right now we were to try to change the image, which we can do, what we want to do is go down here to the resample image and just click off on that check mark, okay, which gives us the option to be able to change a few of these things. So we're going to change the 300 to 100. Okay, and notice that what happens is that it automatically changes the width and height values to 6 inches by 6 inches. Okay, and then what we want to do is go ahead and let's change it, instead of 100, let's put 150 in there. And it's going to change it to 4 by 4. Okay, go ahead and click OK. And just watch what happens. Notice that if you maybe didn't catch it, that's okay. But notice that our image went to 4 inches by 4 inches. And if you have a pretty good eye, you're going to notice that around in this blue area, it's just not as sharp as it was. Okay, our resolution went down from 300 to 150, so our picture isn't as clear as it was because 300 is, remember, print quality and higher. So you can see that it's a little bit pixelated-y, not terrible, but if we were to print this out, you would definitely tell that it's a little grainy, okay? So that's how you can change your resolution. Again, going to image and then image size will give you that option, okay? So I'm going to pause the video here for a second and we will continue with our next section. Okay, we can delete our A2 here. We are no longer going to use our little birdie. So when it asks if we want to save changes for this, no, we don't have to. This was just a practice one. We're not going to put it in our lessons. So it's okay to just go ahead and click no. So the next thing I want to talk about is how do we, let's say, create a brand new document, because there's always the possibility that we're going to create something from scratch and we're not going to want to start with an image already there. So what that process looks like is we go ahead and hit File, New, and the following dialog box is going to pop up. So here you can actually name your document right away. And what we are going to, we can just name it practice. That's fine, and just type practice right in there. Okay. And then where it has the width, we're going to put our width at 8.125. And then our height, we're going to put at 11.125, which is actually the size of a standard sheet of paper. And we're going to leave our resolution at 300. That's print quality. In terms of the color mode, I usually don't touch this very much. RGB just means red, green, blue. If you look at this, you're going to notice we also have a gray scale, which if you do this, essentially there's no color, so it's all shades of gray. Or CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But we're just, like I said, we're going to leave it at RGB, no big deal. You can change the color of the background if you want. I'm going to leave it as white, just so you can easily see this, and then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So here you're going to notice we have a brand new, fresh document to work with. It's just a blank canvas, essentially, that we can use. You're going to notice over in your layers panel that we have this white background here. Easy to see, easy to use. And so that is how you make a new file from scratch. File new, and then you just need to put in the dimensions that you want. Now, one thing you're going to notice about Photoshop is that it remembers the last thing that you did. So here you can see, I mean, it changed it just a tish, but if I were to also put like a 5x7 at 72 and click OK, it's going to remember this as well when I go to File New. So it always remembers the last thing that you did. It's kind of a handy feature that Photoshop has, but also it can kind of be annoying because you kind of have to change it all the time, depending upon what you're doing. So once you have this open, we could go and do a file save as. And this would be saved. Let's put it in our lessons. Notice that the default file type right now is a JPEG. We could change it to a Photoshop file if we wanted to. Or you can save it as a JPEG. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to save mine as a JPEG and just leave it as practice and then go ahead and hit save.